ever met someone who just sees through the noise? You're in a group talking circles around a problem, throwing out half-baked ideas, bouncing from one hot take to the next, and then someone chimes in. Not loud, not dramatic, just calm, clear, and confident. And suddenly, everything clicks. Their words cut straight through the confusion like a razor. Not because they're smarter, not because they talk more, but because they think better. Clear thinking feels rare, almost unsettling. It's like watching someone navigate a maze with a map while everyone else is running around blindfolded. But here's the truth most people miss. Clear thinking isn't some natural-born gift. It's a skill, sharpened through practice, reflection, and a willingness to ask harder questions. And most people never learn how to do it. Why? Because they think they're already doing it. Let's get something straight. Just because your brain is busy doesn't mean it's thinking clearly. In fact, for most of us, what we call thinking is really just reacting with extra steps. We absorb information, form quick opinions, then spend most of our mental energy defending those opinions. Regardless of whether they're true or useful, this kind of mental autopilot feels productive, but it leads to shallow reasoning, emotional overreactions, and poor decision-making. And yet, this is how the majority of people operate, especially in high-stress situations. They confuse speed with clarity, certainty with understanding, confidence with competence. Real thinking, the kind that brings clarity, works differently. It starts with slowing down, taking in the full picture, challenging your own instincts, and, most importantly, asking, what's actually true here? But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we dive into the techniques of clear thinking, we need to understand what gets in the way. Because clarity doesn't come from doing more. It comes from removing what clouds the mind: noise, bias, ego, emotional static. These are the mental smudges that make it hard to see clearly, like trying to read through a foggy window. And the first step toward clarity is recognizing when the window isn't clean. In the next section, we'll start exploring what that cleaning process looks like, how to pause the noise, tune into your own mind, and make decisions that actually reflect your values and goals. But for now, here's the big idea to hold on to. Clear thinking feels rare because it is, not because it's impossible, but because most people never learn how to slow down long enough to notice the difference. One of the clearest signs of a sharp thinker isn't how fast they respond, it's how long they pause. In conversation, it might feel like a delay, but that delay, it's where the real work happens. Pausing, just for a second, creates space, and that space lets you think with intention, not just instinct. Most people rush to respond because silence makes them uncomfortable. They fear being seen as slow, unsure, or weak, but clear thinkers know something different. That pause, it's not a weakness, it's a signal of control. It shows you're not reacting, you're choosing. And in a world obsessed with speed, deliberate thinking stands out. Let's take a practical example. Imagine you're in a meeting and someone says something provocative. Everyone jumps in, defensive, dismissive, maybe even angry. But you pause, you take a breath, you ask yourself, what's really being said here? What are they actually trying to solve? That single pause can completely change the direction of the conversation. Why? Because you're not letting your emotions steer the ship. You're letting your mind do the work. Here's a helpful metaphor. Think of your brain like a camera lens. If you move too fast, everything stays blurry. But the moment you stop and focus, you can actually see. Clarity requires stillness, not forever, just long enough to check in. Clear thinkers make this a habit. They create mental checkpoints before reacting. What am I feeling right now? Is this thought actually useful? Am I solving the right problem? These tiny internal pauses build a feedback loop, one that replaces knee-jerk responses with thoughtful choices. Over time, this doesn't just improve your thinking, it transforms how people perceive you. They see you as calm, measured, almost unshakable, and that can be unsettling. Because when someone isn't flustered by chaos, they naturally take on more influence. Not because they're loud, but because they listen. They observe. They respond when it matters most. So here's a takeaway you can use today. Next time you're asked a tough question, pause for 2 seconds before speaking. Not because you're unsure, but because you're showing yourself and everyone else that your mind is in the driver's seat. That pause, it's not empty. It's where clarity begins. Let's be clear. Emotions aren't the enemy of thinking. They're data. But if you don't know how to handle them, they turn into noise, static in your signal, fog on the lens. And the clearer you want your thinking to be, the more you need to know when to step outside the emotion. Now, this isn't about becoming cold or robotic. It's about learning to observe your emotions without getting hijacked by them. Picture this. You're standing in the middle of a storm. Wind, rain, lightning, the works. That's what it feels like to think inside an emotional surge. Everything's distorted. You can't tell up from down, and every reaction feels urgent even when it's not. But now imagine stepping into a glass shelter. You can still see the storm, you can feel its weight, but it's not controlling you anymore. That's the mental shift clear thinkers make. They don't suppress their emotions, they contain them. They notice, I'm feeling angry, I'm feeling anxious, noted. And then they move forward with awareness, not reactivity. Because here's the truth, emotional reactivity is a clarity killer. Anger narrows your focus, anxiety spins stories out of thin air, and ego convinces you you're right, just because you want to be. And when those forces take over, you don't see the situation as it is. You see it as your feelings want it to be. Clear thinkers build the habit of naming what they feel, instead of being swept away by it. Psychologists call it affect labeling. It's simple. I feel frustrated. I feel defensive. I feel uncertain. And this small habit, it short-circuits the emotional surge, bringing the thinking part of your brain back online. Think of it like wiping condensation off a mirror. You're not changing what's there, you're just making it visible again. And that's a superpower. Because when other people are spiraling, arguing, panicking, overreacting, and you stay composed, it shifts the entire room. People start looking to you for clarity because you're the one who's not clouded, not flinching, not distracted. But that presence, it only comes when you've built the skill of emotional awareness. When you've learned to feel everything fully without letting it do the thinking for you. It's not easy, but it's the difference between being pulled by every wave and learning how to surf. Most people chase better answers. Clear thinkers, they chase better questions. Because the quality of your thinking has everything to do with the quality of the questions you ask yourself. If you start with a weak question, like, how do I prove I'm right? You'll always end up with a biased answer. You won't learn, you'll just defend. And that's not thinking, that's protecting your ego. So what do sharp thinkers ask instead? They ask, what's actually true here? What am I missing? What would I believe if I didn't already have an opinion? What's the cost of being wrong? These questions sound simple, but they force your brain out of autopilot and into clarity. Let's take a real-world example. You get critical feedback at work. Most people immediately ask, how do I fix this? Or worse, why are they attacking me? But a better question is, what part of this might be true, even if it stings? Even if it's unfair, that question gives you control. It puts you in learning mode, not panic mode. Or say you're about to make a big decision. Most people ask, what if it doesn't work? But clear thinkers ask, what would have to be true for this to work? Now you're not stuck in fear. You're thinking in frameworks, and frameworks give you leverage. Here's another powerful question. What problem am I actually solving? Because so often, people chase solutions to the wrong problem. They're stressed, but they try to optimize their calendar. They're lonely, but they keep tweaking their to-do list. Wrong question, wrong answer. Clear thinkers slow down long enough to zoom out. They don't just react to symptoms, they diagnose the root. And that starts with asking the questions no one else is willing to ask. Especially the ones that make you uncomfortable. Because those questions, they force clarity, they cut through stories, they surface hidden assumptions. They reveal truth, whether you like it or not. And truth, even when it's messy, is the foundation of clear thought. So if you want to think better, don't rush for answers. Sit with the right questions. The better they get, the clearer your mind becomes. Clear thinking isn't about having a bigger brain. It's about using better tools. And one of the most powerful tools? Mental models. Now, don't let the name throw you. A mental model is just a fancy term for how you understand the world. It's a shortcut your brain uses to make sense of complex stuff. And the better your shortcuts, the faster and clearer your thinking becomes. Let's break that down. Say you're deciding whether to take on a new project. If you're flying blind, you might ask, do I have time for this? Or does it sound exciting? But a mental model would give you a sharper lens, like opportunity cost. That model says every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. Now you're not just asking, do I want to do it? You're asking, is this better than everything else I could be doing? Another one, second order thinking. It asks, what happens next? And then after that? Most people stop at the first effect. Clear thinkers look 2 or 3 steps ahead. Example, you start going to the gym every morning. First order effect, you get healthier. Second order, you sleep better. You feel more confident. Your relationships improve. Your work performance climbs. Small action, big ripple. That's second order thinking. Or try this. Inversion. Instead of asking, how do I succeed? You flip it. How could I fail? And how do I avoid that? It's weirdly powerful because we often know what not to do better than what to do. Inversion helps you avoid disaster by thinking in reverse. And here's the thing. Clear thinkers collect these mental models over time. Not to sound smart, not to impress anyone, but to reduce mental friction, to make better decisions with less stress. Because when your brain has a toolbox, you don't just guess. You reach in, grab the right model, and build your clarity with it. So don't try to memorize every model you find online. Start with a few that actually click with you. Use them in real life. Test them, refine them, make them yours. And over time, you'll stop getting stuck in decision loops. Because you won't just be thinking harder, you'll be thinking smarter. Clear thinking doesn't just come from what you focus on, it comes from everything you don't. In other words, clarity is subtraction. It's the removal of mental clutter. And in a world overflowing with opinions, distractions, and digital noise, that subtraction is harder than ever. We are constantly bombarded. News cycles, notifications, hot takes, trending crises. Every moment someone is trying to rent space in your brain for cheap. And the cost? You lose attention, you lose focus, you lose clarity, because your brain wasn't designed to juggle 1,000 inputs at once. It was designed to filter. But the more you consume without intention, the more your mental filter breaks. And when that happens, you don't think with precision, you think in fragments. You can't tell which thoughts are yours and which ones you just absorbed from scrolling TikTok at 2 a.m. So how do clear thinkers deal with this? They curate their inputs. They choose what enters their mind as carefully as they choose what enters their body. They don't binge headlines, they don't chase outrage, they don't fill every silence with a screen. They protect their attention like it's a limited resource, because it is. Here's a simple rule: if you wouldn't invite someone to speak directly into your mind for 10 minutes, don't let their content do it either. And this isn't about being a hermit. It's about being deliberate, because the environment shapes the mind. And if you want clearer thoughts, you need a cleaner mental environment. Try this. For one day, turn off every notification. Don't check the news. No podcasts, no scrolling. Just let your thoughts be yours. At first, it'll feel quiet, maybe even boring, but then you'll start noticing things. Ideas will stick longer. Your thoughts will feel sharper, and your attention will start returning to you. Clarity doesn't scream, it whispers when the noise finally dies down. So if your thinking feels foggy, if your brain feels scattered, don't push harder. Clear the space first, then watch what rises to the top. Here's something people don't talk about. Clear thinking? It makes people uncomfortable, not because it's rude, not because it's arrogant, but because it reveals things. It shows what others missed. It breaks social scripts, and most of all, it holds up a mirror. When you think clearly, you don't just clarify your own ideas, you expose the fog around you, the assumptions, the contradictions, the emotional reasoning people didn't even realize they were using. And when that happens, people flinch, because it's not just that you're right, it's that you're calm about it, unbothered, unshaken, clear. That stillness, it can be unnerving, especially to people who are used to reacting on impulse or building their identity around a belief they've never questioned. Let's say you're in a heated debate. Everyone's worked up, voices raised, emotions flaring, and then you speak. Clear, thoughtful, precise. No drama, no ego, just insight. The room shifts, because now there's contrast. You didn't try to dominate. You didn't play status games. You just cut through. And suddenly people start realizing how much noise they've been making. That contrast, it's what makes clear thinking powerful, but it's also what makes it uncomfortable to witness. Because when you operate from clarity, you don't blend in, you disrupt patterns. You invite reflection, and reflection is hard. It's much easier to surround yourself with people who think the same way, react the same way, believe the same things. But when someone breaks that mold, it's both magnetic and unsettling. So if you ever feel like your clarity makes people nervous, you're not imagining it. That's what clarity does. It doesn't just change how you think, it changes how people feel around you. And for some, that's too much. So here's the truth. Clear thinking isn't loud. It's not flashy. It doesn't perform. It just is. Still, deliberate, sharp. And in a world obsessed with speed and certainty, that stillness, that depth, it feels different. But different isn't bad. Different is rare, and rare things, they tend to stand out. So if you're someone who pauses before speaking, who questions your own assumptions, who values truth over comfort, keep going. Even when it feels awkward, even when people don't get it, even when the room goes quiet after you speak. That silence, it's not rejection. It's recognition, because clarity doesn't just help you think better, it helps you live better. It brings focus to your goals. It adds intention to your relationships. It gives you peace in places where other people feel pressure. But don't chase clarity to impress people. Chase it because it makes you stronger. Because the clearer your thinking becomes, the harder it is to manipulate you. The harder it is to distract you. The harder it is to shake you. And that's what really scares people. Not your words, not your logic, but your calm, your presence, your ability to walk into a storm and not lose yourself in it. So think clearly, speak carefully, pause often, and trust the power's not in how much you say, it's in how much you see.